Hi, I'm Greens MP David Shoebridge. Over the years, I've worked with many survivors of institutional abuse, and tonight's story is a remarkable tale of overcoming personal demons. Gregory Smith spent most of his life as a fringe dweller, and in 1990 ended up living rough in an isolated rainforest on the New South Wales far north coast. He could have died there, but through grit and determination, Gregory turned his life around. This is his story.
I didn't purposefully set out to go into the forest. That's where I ended up. I ended up there because I had really nowhere else to go. There were no human voices. There were no cars. There was no interference. There was just the soft sounds of the forest. I heard that frog.
And I can picture it. You know, people don't live in forests, by and large, anymore. And people live in houses and hotels and hostels, and but they don't live in forests. I mean, what do you mean you live in a forest?
I don't know how he survived in the forest, really. I mean, it gets wet up there, very wet, and it's also freezing cold up there.
The forest for him became his haven, his sense of peace. Probably not his preferred way of being, but the safest bet at that point in his life.
At one stage that he decided that to keep people safe, he needed to remove himself from society.
It's like, I don't have to run anymore. I don't have to hide. I don't have to fight. I just stop. I was going to die in there, or I was going to leave. Never would have picked this outcome.
Hello, Gregory. How nice to see you. I first met Gregory in September 2008. He came to see me because he'd had a history of trauma and he hadn't had any counselling for it. Can you understand the enormity of how you've gotten to where you are?
Yeah, maybe I don't.
When he first came to me after I came out of the forest, Gregory was still pretty disordered. He dissociated a lot.
Yeah, I remember losing days.
I know.
It's like
I know.
days. I would just black out and I would come to and there'd be this gap in my life and I couldn't explain it.
It was pretty severe stuff and he just kept on coming and slowly his story came out. I had no doubt that whatever you set out to do, you were going to get done.
When we first started talking about his experiences, there were snippets, brief insights into what he might have gone through. One day, I'll never forget the look he gave me. And he turned to me as he was driving and he said, "Do you think I'm a sociopath?" And there was a silence and I turned to Gregory and I said, "Mate, if there was sociopathic behaviour in whatever you experienced, it wasn't you."
I grew up in Tamworth with my 5 sisters. My father was the most dangerous thing in my life. I didn't like him. He was a horrible human being. He always smelt. And I didn't realise it at the time, but today it was alcohol.
Family life, it was extremely frightening. It was extremely violent. It was extremely degrading. Dad was often really angry and he had been beating Mum up and then he'd turned on us and Gregory was trying to protect us. We didn't have a chance to run and hide. And I remember my father just beating him to a pulp. There was blood everywhere.
As a child, I was always waiting for the next beating. I was always waiting to be abused. One day I got home from school and my mother just said, tomorrow we're going to go and see Auntie Muriel. The next day came and we're all packed into the car and we're off to Armidale. I remember thinking, wow, that's a big house Auntie Muriel lives in. It definitely wasn't Auntie Muriel's house. Where we ended up was St Patrick's Orphanage. I was 10. It hadn't occurred to me until a couple of days later that my mother had gave me away. My mother gave me away. And not only had she given me away, she told me a lie to do it. She came back and she collected us, but then she surrendered us again. She could never regain my trust or my respect after that.
I have memories of being in this dorm where all the girls slept and I would cry myself to sleep every night. I recall standing there for hours and hours peeling potatoes. I was 4.
I was sexually abused in that orphanage and, you know, some of those perpetrators were young women, 15, 16-year-old women, and it was their responsibility to bath the younger boys. So, I mean, there's, you know, it's very, to me, it's still very confusing.
The punishments were really severe, brutal. You know, putting kids in isolation, depriving them of things.
And underneath the staircase, there was a closet. On occasion, I would find myself locked in that closet. And I could be locked in there 4, 6, 8 hours a day, without food, without nothing. I'd just be locked in there. I developed this technique whereby I would retreat into my inner mind, and in there I built this little, beautiful little forested area that had a force field, and in there I could be happy and I could be okay.
Minda is an Aboriginal word meaning shelter, and this shelter shows what the Child Welfare Department can do when it has the money.
From the age of 14, I spent around about 4.5 years in juvenile detention in the punitive system. I did some very silly things. I stole, and I mean, my respect for society was so low.
Boys generally respond well to discipline.
I remember being a teenager and him coming back into my life. By that point in time, he was really angry. And you couldn't talk to him. He was so angry.
I was given a battery of tests. I was of very low intelligence. I think my IQ was measured at 81, and psychologists, psychiatrists diagnosed me as a sociopath. And I'd ask different people around, you know, what's a sociopath? Somebody that has contempt for society, creates a lot of violence in society. Yeah, I'm good at that. I can do all those things. Yep, not a problem. When I left the institutions, I was so angry that a person would only need to look at me sideways and I would shoulder charge them. I would headbutt them in the face. I was merciless. I was doing my apprenticeship with alcohol. Rum meant fight. Rum meant pain.
Every time he came into my house, whatever it was he wanted vanished with him. He'd stay for a night or two, and then when you'd get up and he'd be gone with all your things.
I managed to get a couple of jobs in Tamworth, met my future wife, Julie. That relationship centred around alcohol, and I would get angry and abuse her. And that turned into a pattern over time until she decided one day that she was in a dangerous relationship. She just started to see me for who I really was. I was 25 years old when I realised I was an alcoholic. I'd become my father. It's like a thief in the night, alcoholism. It takes away certain things and you don't even realise that they're gone until you want to use them. For example, tolerance, patience, friendliness, and they're not there anymore. There was a little period of my life where I was trying once again to get my life together and be the responsible citizen. You know, I'd gone back to Tamworth and developed some contracts, cleaning, carpet cleaning, and I'd obtained this townhouse, and basically I had an open door policy because there were so many homeless people, and so I had free food, free drugs, free marijuana, free booze, and people would come and hang and forget to clean up after themselves. The third time I came in and the place was a mess again, and I went out to the truck, grabbed a jerry can of fuel, came in, started sloshing the fuel all over the walls. And I had a really nice Zippo lighter at the time. Flicked that, zipped it, threw it over into the petrol and whoosh, it went up.
It was like, oh, here we go again, more trouble. There's always more trouble. And we thought he was going to do better this time. This time he seems a little bit more settled. But the next thing you know, he's blowing up apartments.
The end result of that is I found myself in a security room at Tamworth Base Hospital with guards on the door. The psychiatrist came and he spent days talking to me. He said, the simple truth is I don't think you were responsible for your actions. I was pretty much transient for 3.5 years. I was hitchhiking up and down the East Coast just trying to find a meal.
We were driving on the M1 past Dreamworld and I looked out the window and I saw him hitchhiking. And I turned to my husband and I just said to him, keep driving. Because he's like, but that's your brother. And I'm going, yes, I know. Keep driving. Don't stop. We don't want him in our life. I just couldn't do any more trouble at that point.
If you don't want people to find you, you have to go where people won't go. I'd exhausted all my options and I was walking along these roads just southwest of Mullumbimby. And this dirt road seemed like a good idea at the time. And at the end of the dirt road, there was a forest. First night in there, it rained. It really rained. I was covered in leeches and soaking wet. I dragged my dry as a bone out and I put that over me. About 3 weeks in, I find myself eating anything that crawled. I've eaten beetles, worm, grubs. I started hunting land mullet, lizards, any lizard. That's my bedroom window. So, this is my campsite, quite literally. The forest took me back to when I was in that cupboard under the stairs in the orphanage, and I'd formed that place in my mind, of no humans, just a nice soft place. I was never going to glean enough produce from the forest to satisfy my addictions, so I established a nice little area north of my camp whereby I could grow some marijuana plants. Just that simple action opened up a whole trading network for me. It took me to the Byron Bay market, it took me to Sydney, it took me to lots of places. Some of that horticultural product I traded for cash. and I was able to buy homebrew kits. It was quite a lethal brew that brought me to my knees. My lineal recollection of time is not all that good. I don't have a lot of clarity around those couple of years in the forest because it was mixed in with psychosis. I'm off having conversations with some aliens or gremlins or my ancestors. My ancestors were saying, you can't live like this. And they're saying that they're concerned about me and that my health is deteriorating.
He had some simple choices to make. One choice was to go down the road of alcoholism, drug addiction, living out in the forest. That was a road to oblivion. Or take the very brave, necessary step for the alternative life of which he had no idea what that might look like.
I have no recollection of months after I exited the forest. The very next consciousness that I have was actually sitting on a park bench at the back of the Tweed Heads Hospital. I was still very sick. I still had psychosis. There was still a lot of confusion in my mind.
He was at death's door. He was a guy who had a whole range of problems that alcoholics experience, all the neurological problems. He used to walk with a stick. He could barely walk.
And all of a sudden it struck me. I had created all this damage. I had caused all this mess. I thought I was fighting other people. I was fighting myself. My whole life I'd been fighting myself. And I remember dropping to my knees and I'm thinking, I don't want to fight anymore. So I made a decision there on that park bench that I would do whatever it took not to be the person that I was there that day.
Well, he stopped drinking, and that made a huge difference because it took one big factor in violence away. And then his memory started getting better as well. He was able to function, to actually learn.
I'd always wanted to do my leaving certificate. I wanted to finish school. I never thought I was dumb. Everybody told me I was, but I didn't think I was. I started going to TAFE at Southport, so I found myself moving my possessions into the sand dunes closer to TAFE. When people would ask me where I lived, I'd just say, oh yeah, down next to the beach.
It's good to see you.
Good to see you.
Gregory came to TAFE in 2003 and I was one of his teachers. Do you want to go and see a classroom?
Let's do it.
Okay.
That sounds good to me.
He came in and he was dressed unusually, so you could tell he'd had some life experiences. I was teaching adult tertiary preparation, which is a course designed for people who want a second chance at education.
Come and have a look at this room. It's so different.
I had the impression that his childhood had been challenging.
Do you remember where you used to sit?
No, not really.
I can remember, and I remember this for whatever reason, I have no idea. I remember you sitting about here. So it was a desk to the side.
I did. And the reason I sat down there was because I couldn't see anybody else.
Exactly. Yeah, that's what
He sat and he cried one day, and they were sort of tears of frustration, but then they were tears of, can I really do this? And then he got on with the job.
And I remember you ringing me.
And so he would write draft after draft of an essay until he got it right.
This is amazing.
Yes.
But I think as the year progressed, he learnt to make friends and talk to people and enjoy the learning experience. I know he enjoyed the learning experience. He was like a sponge. He just absorbed everything you taught him and more. He learnt.
Towards the end of my TAFE experience, the tertiary prep, it was becoming evident that I would qualify for an invitation to university, and this word sociology kept jumping out at me. And when I looked up the definition of sociology, it was about, the study of human society. And I thought, yeah, I want to know about human society. I want to understand why I hate society so much.
I was a lecturer at Southern Cross University at the Coffs Harbour campus, and I was teaching what's possibly one of the most boring units on earth.
No, Richard was boring. Richard was so boring.
Gregory sort of put his hand up and goes, "Richard, do you mind if I say something?" And I said, "Yeah, sure, go ahead, Gregory." And he goes, "I just want to say that I used to be a werewolf, but I'm over it now." And at that point, I said, "I like this guy. He's going to be my friend."
So I was doing some research for an assignment there, and in my search results, this Forgotten Australians kept coming up. Upwards of 500,000 kids, non-Indigenous, experienced some form of institutional care as children. I thought, that's me.
The Forgotten Australians report absolutely blew the lid off a history that was secret, that was covered up.
And it talks about the abuse that was systemic in Australian childcare for so long. And it talked about not being believed. One of the scariest things that can happen to you as a human being, I believe, is to think that you experience so much pain and trauma and isolation alone. But then to discover that there's a whole lot of people out there that have experienced the same thing. I didn't even need to talk to anybody after that. Just knowing that they existed was cathartic in itself. And it took some time for it to dawn on me that my sisters are Forgotten Australians as well. 2004 Christmas Day, I get a phone call from Wendy. She said to me, "I hear you haven't had a drink for 4 years." I said, "That's right." And she said, "Oh, do you think we could have a talk?" How you doing?
How are you? When I met Gregory, I was in a place that everything I touched went sour.
I knew you were sick, like just from looking at you.
I just wanted to die. I was dead inside. I just wanted to die on the outside.
Yeah, no, that's right.
And get buried.
I drank to remove myself from life. I drank to pass out so I could sleep. I didn't want to feel, I didn't want to dream, I didn't want to remember.
You're not angry?
Yeah, no, I stopped being angry for a while, actually. Yeah, I couldn't move forward if I was still angry.
No.
Gregory came back into my life 14 years ago. A totally changed person, an amazing example to me. Just to see him and just to hear the tone of his voice and the softness in his voice absolutely made me stop and listen to him.
And a couple of weeks later, her son Scott rang me. He said, "Can you help? My mum's really angry and really drunk." I just allowed her to talk. And then she cracked and she just jumped up and started smashing the place up. And I just let her go. When Wendy got up the next morning, she was devastated.
He led me to some people who have a program for people like me that drank the way I drank, and they showed me how they changed their lives. He supported me through that. My thinking was, if you can do it, then I can do it too.
She's never drank again. She's a different person today. She has a very good life today. When I was invited to do my honours, and I'm in discussion with Richard Hill about, well, what is an honours? I have no idea. I didn't even know what honours were. And he explained that to me. And then, well, what am I going to do honours on? And he turned around with this wry smile and he just looked at me. He said, well, why don't you do it on what you know best? What's that? You.
Hiya. I became his supervisor. He wrote all his substantive chapters in about 6 months, and he got first class honours, and he got an APA scholarship. He did really well. He does stand head and shoulders above the rest. He's done a PhD. That's not an easy task.
Chancellor, I present to you Gregory Smith, who has been admitted by you to the degree of Doctor of Philosophy.
So it just goes to show again the level of the work he's done, the level of the man he is.
When he was doing his PhD, he was interviewing people who had had a similar background, childhood.
Gregory's research is incredibly important. We need these oral histories to ensure that the experiences of those people aren't forgotten and more importantly, that we have learnt the lessons of them.
They can go down underneath that and they never have to touch the top of your land.
He's now a lecturer. He doesn't big note himself. He just goes about things quietly.
He gets great feedback from students. Students love him, you know, because he's very mindful of how he learnt.
The thing to remember is essays are people too. I mean, I respect and,
I think because of Gregory's background, it just makes it easy for him to relate to us and vice versa, really. And, you know, no matter what age you are, you're able to do it. There's no barrier.
Yeah, that's been a big one for me.
Yeah.
But we can begin to see that these decisions have a wider impact on our society as a whole.
We met in my first year of doing a degree. I'd also been in institutions as a child, and I think the way that I dealt with it as an adult was to try and forget it. Gregory's way was different. It's like, this is also part of who I am.
Come in.
And it's actually a strength, not a weakness.
Good, how are you?
Yeah, I'm all right.
That was a real watershed for me.
And I think the fact that, you know, you've got it straight from the horse's mouth is probably the most valuable.
I think Gregory represents how to take the crap in life and grow beautiful things out of it.
When I was just into my PhD, I bought 25 acres just south of Grafton. I didn't want to be homeless anymore. And owning a piece of land meant nobody could kick me off it. Nobody could tell me I had no right to be there.
If you ask Gregory when he was up on the hill there outside Mullumbimby whether he would have had a property, whether he'd be a lecturer at university, he would have laughed at you. He would have said, you change your drugs.
Sometimes I come down in the morning, have a little bit of a reflection, a bit of meditation.
He told me that I could have a life, and it didn't matter what had happened to us as children, we could be good people, no matter what.
Richard Hill, to his credit, kept telling me that I wasn't a sociopath, but I still had these reservations. The idea of being a sociopath started to dissolve a little bit towards the end of my PhD. They told me I was stupid. If I can do a PhD, maybe I'm not so stupid. Maybe they've made some mistakes on some of these other diagnoses. Today, I don't think I'm a sociopath. Yeah, I'm just another human being. Yeah, do the best I can like most human beings.